In this video, we will look at some of the most dangerous criminals still at large in the United States. Fugitives who have murdered, trafficked, tortured, and disappeared, sometimes for decades, while law enforcement agencies across the country continue searching for them. The FBI's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list was created to change those odds. Some are caught within hours of being named. Others have been running for 30 years. The cases that follow in this video span decades and cover crimes of extraordinary violence. What connects them is that none have not been found. Subscribe so you never miss a new video, and let's get into it. Trung Duc Lu, State, Pennsylvania. On March 11, 2026, the FBI announced Lu as the 539th addition to the 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list. He is wanted in connection with crimes that took place in August 2014 in Philadelphia, a kidnapping, torture, and double murder tied to a drug debt collection operation that investigators say originated in New York City. The FBI's Philadelphia field office described the violence as extreme, even by the standards of cases that reach the Most Wanted list. Lu was born in Vietnam and came to the United States as a teenager. He settled in Queens, New York, and is believed to be a suspected member of the Born to Kill street gang, also known as the BTK or Canal Boys. The gang has operated in New York's Vietnamese American communities for decades and has a documented history of violent criminal activity. Investigators say Lu was one of several men dispatched from New York to Philadelphia, specifically to collect a marijuana debt of more than $100,000. The people sent to collect that debt did not go with the intention of having a conversation. 3 men were targeted. All 3 were Vietnamese brothers. Lu and his associates kidnapped them and over a period of time subjected them to torture. 2 of the brothers were killed. The 3rd survived. The surviving victim's account helped form the basis of the investigation that would eventually lead to federal charges against Lu. The fact that anyone lived through what happened in that Philadelphia location is significant. It means there is a witness, and it means law enforcement has a direct account of what Lu and the others allegedly did. What makes this case particularly striking is the logistics of it. Lu and the others traveled from New York to Pennsylvania with the purpose of committing these acts. This was not a crime of impulse or proximity. Investigators say they were sent, organized, dispatched, and deliberate. 2 men were tortured and killed over a marijuana debt. The 3rd was left for dead. Then the group returned to New York. Lu was not immediately identified and arrested. The investigation developed over the following years, but by the time federal charges were ready, Lu was gone. He is believed to have fled to Vietnam, where he was born and where he retains connections. He speaks both Vietnamese and English. The combination of international ties, language, and familiarity with Vietnam makes him significantly harder to locate than a fugitive who has nowhere obvious to go. His background within the Born to Kill organization is relevant to that picture. The BTK gang has historically maintained connections across multiple countries, particularly between the United States and Vietnam. A fugitive with those kinds of network ties and an ability to move between cultures is not operating alone. He has infrastructure. He has people who know him and, presumably, people willing to help him stay hidden. The FBI classified Lu as a top 10 fugitive because of the severity of the underlying crimes and the assessment that he poses a continued danger. His placement on the list on March 11, 2026, came alongside announcements about 2 other new additions, signaling a coordinated enforcement push by the agency in early 2026. Lu's designation as the 539th person ever added to this list puts him in company with some of the most dangerous fugitives in American history. 93% of the people ever placed on that list have been caught. Lu has not been. The victims in this case were brothers. They were targeted not because of who they were, but because of a debt. Someone decided that more than $100,000 in marijuana money was worth kidnapping 3 people, torturing them, and leaving 2 of them dead in Philadelphia. That decision was allegedly Trung Duc Lu's to carry out. The FBI is offering up to $1 million for information leading directly to his arrest, and as of this video, he has not been found. Glenn Stewart Godwin. If there is a case that demonstrates just how completely a determined man can slip through the grasp of law enforcement, it is this one. Godwin has escaped from 2 separate prisons in 2 different countries, committed murder while a fugitive, and has not been seen in decades. Godwin was convicted of murder in California and sent to Folsom State Prison, one of the most well-known correctional facilities in the country. In 1987, he escaped. The details of how he managed to get out of Folsom have never been fully disclosed by law enforcement, but the result was the same. A convicted murderer walked out of a maximum security prison and disappeared. California authorities launched a search. They did not find him. What happened next made the case considerably worse. Godwin eventually surfaced in Mexico, where he was arrested for drug trafficking. Mexican authorities imprisoned him in Guadalajara. For a brief period, it appeared that law enforcement had gotten a second chance to hold him accountable. That chance did not last. In 1991, Godwin allegedly murdered a fellow inmate inside the Guadalajara prison. Shortly after, he escaped from that facility as well. He was now a fugitive who had broken out of 2 separate prisons in 2 separate countries and had killed again while supposedly behind bars. After that second escape, he vanished. No confirmed sightings, no arrests. Investigators believe he moved south into Central or South America, where he has been living under a series of aliases for more than 3 decades. The FBI has identified at least 3 names he has used: Michael Cabrera, Nigel Lopez, and Dennis Harold McWilliams. Any one of these identities could have allowed him to build a new life, obtain documents, and blend into communities where law enforcement cooperation with American agencies is limited or inconsistent. What makes Godwin's case particularly difficult is the combination of factors working in his favor. He has demonstrated that he can survive in foreign countries without support from any known network. He has shown a willingness to commit violence when he believes it serves him, inside prison or outside of it. And he has had more than 30 years to establish himself under a false name somewhere beyond straightforward reach of American law enforcement. The FBI has him on its most wanted list and is offering a reward of $20,000 for information leading to his arrest. That figure is considerably lower than the $1 million rewards attached to some of the other names on the list, which itself reflects the complexity of the case. Finding Godwin would likely require a tip from someone in his immediate circle, wherever that circle currently exists. The original crime that sent him to Folsom in the first place was a murder conviction in California. The specific details of that case are not always prominent in the reporting around him, because his subsequent crimes and escapes have so thoroughly overshadowed the original offense. But it is worth remembering that before any of this began, before the escapes, before the drug trafficking, before the killing in Guadalajara, a judge and jury in California determined that he had committed a murder serious enough to warrant a lengthy prison term. Everything that followed was built on that foundation. There is a particular category of fugitive that law enforcement finds most difficult to apprehend, and Godwin fits it precisely. He is not someone who stayed in his hometown, trusting old friends and old habits. He crossed international borders immediately. He adapted. He survived in environments that would have been entirely foreign to most people. And when a second imprisonment threatened to end his freedom again, he found a way out of that too. The people who are hardest to catch are the ones who never stop moving and never stop adapting, and by every indication, Godwin has been doing exactly that since 1991. The FBI has never stopped looking. His name has remained on the most wanted list through multiple presidential administrations, through the complete transformation of law enforcement technology, through decades of changes in how American agencies cooperate with foreign governments. None of it has produced him. He has been on the FBI's most wanted list for decades and, as of this video, has never been found. On June 11, 1962, 3 inmates pulled off what many consider the most audacious prison escape in American history. Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin walked out of Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, made their way into the waters of San Francisco Bay, and were never definitively seen again. The escape had taken months to plan. The 3 men had been working in near-total secrecy, chipping away at the concrete around the ventilation grills in their cells using improvised tools, spoons, a drill fashioned from a vacuum motor, whatever they could obtain or fabricate inside the prison. The walls of Alcatraz were old, and the concrete around the utility corridor had weakened over the years. They worked at night, using cardboard to muffle the sound. Once, through the vents, they accessed a utility corridor that ran behind their cells. From there, they climbed to the roof and made their way down to the water's edge. The raft they used was constructed from more than 50 stolen raincoats, stitched and glued together. They had inflated it using a modified concertina. Life preservers were fashioned from the same material. It was crude, improvised equipment intended to carry 3 men across more than a mile of cold, fast-moving bay water at night. Whether it held together long enough to matter is a question that has never been answered. The following morning, guards discovered the cells were empty. Dummy heads the men had sculpted from soap, toilet paper, and real human hair, collected from the prison barber shop, were still propped on the pillows. The FBI launched an immediate investigation. Within days, some debris consistent with the escape was recovered from the bay: a wooden paddle, a makeshift life vest, and what appeared to be portions of the raft. Personal belongings belonging to the Anglin brothers also washed ashore on nearby Angel Island. The FBI's official position has long been that all 3 men drowned. The water temperature in San Francisco Bay that night was somewhere around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The currents are strong and unpredictable. Law enforcement argued that no inexperienced swimmer could survive that crossing on a poorly constructed raft in those conditions, and no credible confirmed sighting of any of the 3 men ever emerged in the months or years that followed. The Anglin family has never accepted that conclusion. Over the decades, relatives have maintained that John and Clarence Anglin survived and made contact after the escape. A photograph surfaced that the family claimed showed the 2 brothers in Brazil in the early 1970s, older but recognizable. A letter was reportedly received in 2013, allegedly written by John Anglin, claiming both brothers were alive and in poor health, and offering to surrender in exchange for medical care and a reduced sentence. The FBI examined the letter and could not confirm its authenticity. The photograph remained inconclusive. Frank Morris had no family making similar claims on his behalf. Morris was considered the primary architect of the plan. He had a tested IQ of 133 and had spent much of his life escaping from institutions. If any of the 3 had the skills to survive what came after, investigators and historians have often suggested it was him. The case has never been officially closed, in part because all 3 men were still of possible living age for several decades after the escape, and in part because no bodies were ever recovered. Alcatraz closed as a federal prison the following year, in 1963. The escape remains the only successful one in the island facility's history as a federal penitentiary. The FBI has never officially closed the case, and the question of what happened to Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers that night in San Francisco Bay has never been definitively answered. Lester Eubanks is wanted by the United States Marshals Service for escape, but the crime that put him behind bars in the first place is what makes his case so disturbing. In 1965, Eubanks murdered 14-year-old Mary Diener in Wayne County, Ohio. The crime involved both murder and attempted rape. Diener was a child, and the details of what happened to her were violent enough that an Ohio court sentenced Eubanks to death. He sat on death row waiting for an execution that never came. In 1972, the United States Supreme Court effectively suspended capital punishment across the country, and Eubanks had his sentence commuted to life in prison. A man convicted of murdering a child would now serve out his days in the Ohio correctional system rather than face execution. What happened next is the part that is difficult to explain. In 1973, Eubanks was allowed to join a supervised shopping trip in Columbus, Ohio. Prison officials brought him off the grounds as part of what was described as a pre-release program. At some point during that trip, Eubanks simply walked away. No dramatic tunnel, no improvised raft. He walked away from his guards in a shopping center and disappeared. He was never brought back. That was more than 50 years ago. The case of Lester Eubanks belongs to a particular category of fugitive that law enforcement considers especially troubling. These are not individuals who evaded capture after committing a crime. These are individuals who were caught, prosecuted, convicted, and imprisoned, who went through the full weight of the judicial system and then found their way back into free society anyway. The violence they are capable of is not theoretical. It has already been demonstrated. The courts have already made a determination about what they did, and yet they are out there. Eubanks was added to the United States Marshals Service 15 Most Wanted list. The Marshals have distributed his photograph and information for decades, and over the years, investigators have followed up on tips placing him in various cities. Some of those leads have suggested he spent time in California. Others have placed him in other parts of the country. None of them resulted in an arrest. The Marshals believe he may have used false identification over the years to build a life under a different name, which is not unusual for someone who has been free for this long. A man who disappeared in 1973 has had half a century to become someone else entirely. His case also reflects something broader about how the correctional system handles individuals serving life sentences. Pre-release programs, work details, supervised outings. These programs exist for legitimate rehabilitative reasons, and in the vast majority of cases they function without incident. But Eubanks represents what happens when they fail. A man serving life for the murder of a 14-year-old girl was taken to a shopping center and handed, however briefly, the opportunity to run. He took it, and the system has spent the decades since trying to find him. Mary Diener was 14 years old when she was killed. She did not get the chance to grow up, to age, to become someone else. Eubanks has had more than 50 years of life that she was denied. Whether he has spent those years looking over his shoulder, or whether he has managed to live with some degree of normalcy is unknown. What is known is that the warrant for his escape remains active, that the Marshals Service has not stopped looking, and that the man who murdered a child in Ohio in 1965 walked away from a shopping trip in 1973 and has been free ever since. He has never been recaptured. Jehad Serwan Mostafa, raised in San Diego, California. While Lester Eubanks represents a convicted criminal who slipped out of custody and disappeared, Mostafa represents something different. An American citizen who left the country voluntarily and joined a foreign terrorist organization, rising to become what investigators believe is the highest-ranking U.S. national operating within al-Shabaab's command structure. Al-Shabaab is a Somalia-based militant group affiliated with al-Qaeda. It has carried out bombings, assassinations, and mass casualty attacks across East Africa for more than 2 decades. The group controls significant territory in southern and central Somalia and has conducted attacks in Kenya, Uganda, and other neighboring countries. It is designated as a foreign terrorist organization by the United States government. Operating against it from a law enforcement standpoint means working in one of the most difficult environments on Earth, a country with no stable central government and large ungoverned territories where outside agencies have almost no reach. Mostafa grew up in San Diego. He was a U.S. citizen. By 2006, investigators say he had made his way to Somalia and embedded himself with al-Shabaab. Over the years that followed, he took on multiple roles within the organization. He served as a military instructor, training fighters in combat operations. He worked as a propagandist, producing and distributing material designed to recruit new members and promote the group's ideology. He acted as an intermediary between al-Shabaab and other terrorist organizations, functioning as a connector within a broader network of militant groups. And he became a leader in the group's use of explosives, one of its most lethal capabilities, responsible for attacks that have killed hundreds of civilians. He has reportedly been with the organization since 2006. That is nearly 2 decades embedded within a foreign terrorist group, in an active conflict zone where American law enforcement cannot simply dispatch agents to make an arrest. Federal charges have been filed against him in the United States. The indictment covers material support for terrorism and related offenses. But an indictment and an arrest are 2 very different things when the subject is operating inside a failed state under the protection of an armed militant organization. What makes Mostafa's case particularly significant is the combination of his citizenship and his seniority. Foreign nationals who join terrorist organizations are a serious concern for national security. But an American who rises to senior leadership within one of those organizations represents a different category of threat. He understands American culture, American institutions, and potentially how American targets think and operate. Investigators have described him as a genuine asset to al-Shabaab, not simply a participant but a functional leader whose continued presence within the organization strengthens it. The U.S. Department of State's Rewards for Justice program has offered up to $10 million for information leading to his location. That reward figure places him among the most significant targets in the program's history. $10 million is the same tier reserved for individuals considered direct threats to American national security. The fact that he has remained beyond reach for this long, nearly 20 years since he first joined the group, reflects how difficult it is to operate against someone who is both inside a hostile environment and protected by the organization around him. His case also raises questions that go beyond law enforcement. How does an American citizen end up as a senior figure in a foreign terrorist organization? What radicalization process leads from growing up in San Diego to training militants and building bombs in Somalia? Those questions don't have simple answers, and investigators have not publicly detailed the path that brought him to al-Shabaab. What is documented is what he has done since arriving, and by all accounts, he has been an active and significant participant in the group's operations for the better part of 2 decades. He has not been seen or confirmed in the United States since his departure. His current status within al-Shabaab's command structure is not publicly confirmed, but the reward has remained active and the federal charges have never been dropped. The State Department is offering up to $10 million for information leading to his location, and he remains free. Giovanni Vicente Mosquera Serrano. While Jehad Mostafa represents an American who crossed into the world of foreign terrorism, Mosquera Serrano represents something different, a foreign criminal organization that has crossed into America, bringing its violence with it. Tren de Aragua began as a prison gang inside Tocaron Penitentiary in Venezuela's Aragua state. What started as a localized criminal operation controlling a single prison eventually expanded far beyond those walls. By the early 2020s, the gang had spread across Venezuela, then into neighboring countries, then further, Colombia, Peru, Chile, Ecuador. As Venezuelan migration increased dramatically during that period, Tren de Aragua moved with it. Members arrived in country after country and established criminal operations wherever enough of a foothold could be found. Eventually, that expansion reached the United States. The gang has been documented operating in multiple American cities, involved in human trafficking, extortion, robbery, and murder. In 2025, the United States government formally designated Tren de Aragua as a foreign terrorist organization. That designation carried significant legal consequences, expanding the tools federal prosecutors can use against anyone who provides material support to the gang. Mosquera Serrano is believed to hold a senior leadership position within that organization. The FBI added him to the 10 most wanted fugitives list as part of the broader federal effort to dismantle Tren de Aragua's command structure. Placing a gang leader on the most wanted list is a specific, tactical decision. It is not simply a declaration that someone is dangerous. It is an attempt to use maximum public pressure and international law enforcement attention to force a capture. The fact that Mosquera Serrano was added at all signals that investigators consider him a significant operational figure, not a peripheral associate, but someone whose removal would meaningfully affect how the organization functions. The crimes connected to Tren de Aragua in the United States have been serious and, in many cases, extraordinarily violent. Investigators have documented cases involving kidnapping, sexual exploitation, and murder. The gang has been reported operating in cities including New York, Miami, and Denver, among others. One of the characteristics that makes Tren de Aragua particularly difficult to counter is how it recruits and organizes. Members often have no prior criminal record in the United States, no fingerprints on file, no digital history that law enforcement can immediately access. They arrive, establish connections within Venezuelan migrant communities, begin operating before investigators have built a reliable picture of who they are dealing with. For a senior leader like Mosquera Serrano, the challenge is compounded by the international dimension. He is not necessarily in the United States. Gang and cartel leadership frequently operates from outside the country where the criminal activity is taking place, insulating senior figures from direct law enforcement contact. The rank-and-file members take the legal exposure while those at the top communicate through intermediaries and manage operations from a distance, locating someone who may be moving between Venezuela, Colombia, or other parts of South America. Operating within a structure designed to shield its leaders requires the kind of multi-agency international cooperation that takes time and resources. The FBI's decision to name Mosquera Serrano to the 10 most wanted list changes the calculus in that effort. Every country that cooperates with American law enforcement is now formally aware of him. The $1 million minimum reward for information applies to his case. That means that anyone within his network who is tempted to trade information for money now has a very significant incentive to do so. That kind of financial pressure has broken other fugitive cases before. It can turn a trusted associate into an informant. It can reach people that law enforcement cannot reach directly. Whether that will be enough to bring Mosquera Serrano in remains to be seen. Tren de Aragua did not become one of the most rapidly expanding transnational criminal organizations in the Western Hemisphere by being careless. Its leaders understand exposure, and they understand how to manage it. His addition to the list signals that federal law enforcement is treating transnational criminal organizations like Tren de Aragua with the same urgency as individual violent fugitives, and that Mosquera Serrano, wherever he is at the top of that effort. Palak Patel was 21 years old on April 12, 2015, her wedding day. By midnight, she was dead, stabbed inside her own apartment just hours after her wedding ceremony had taken place. Her husband, Bhadreshkumar Patel, was gone before anyone could stop him. The details of what happened that night in the hours following the ceremony remain limited in public record. What investigators established was that Palak was found dead from stab wounds in her apartment, that Bhadreshkumar had fled. He has not been seen since. The FBI added him to its 10 most wanted fugitives list and is offering a reward of up to $250,000 for information leading to his arrest. That reward reflects how seriously federal law enforcement has treated this case and how difficult the search for him has been. Domestic violence cases that escalate to murder are not uncommon in American criminal history. What separates cases like Bhadreshkumar Patel's from others is the speed of flight and the international dimension that makes finding the perpetrator significantly harder. Many individuals who commit violent crimes against a spouse or partner are apprehended within days, sometimes hours. The crime is often impulsive, the suspect is known, and their connections are local. When a fugitive has ties to another country, family, community, resources, a place to go, the calculation changes entirely. Law enforcement must now coordinate across national boundaries, work through foreign governments, operate without the same surveillance infrastructure that exists domestically. Bhadreshkumar Patel was born outside the United States and had the kind of international ties that made disappearing across a border a realistic option. When someone with those connections commits a crime and chooses to run, they are not simply hiding in another city. They may be sheltered by family members who are unlikely to cooperate with American investigators, living in communities where U.S. law enforcement has no direct reach, and operating in a legal environment where extradition is uncertain or unlikely. For Palak Patel's family, that reality has meant years without resolution. The case also illustrates something that appears repeatedly across fugitive cases involving intimate partner violence. The victim was someone who should have been safe. The person who killed her was the one person who had formally committed to her protection and care just hours before. That detail, a wedding ceremony followed within hours by a murder, places this case in a category that is genuinely difficult to understand and even harder to explain. Whatever preceded the violence that night. The outcome was the death of a 21-year-old woman who had no reason to believe she would not survive her wedding day. Investigators have continued searching. The FBI does not close cases like this one simply because years have passed without an arrest. Patel remains on the most wanted list. His photograph and description circulated through the same networks that have led to captures in dozens of other fugitive cases. Tips from members of the public account for a substantial portion of the successful captures that have come from the Most Wanted program over the decades. Investigators working the Patel case are counting on that pattern continuing. The $250,000 reward is substantial. It is the kind of figure that can change someone's calculation about whether to come forward with information they have been holding. In communities abroad, where Patel is believed to have connections, someone knows where he is or has seen him. The FBI is asking those people to make contact. Palak Patel was found in her apartment on what should have been the first night of her married life. Her family has been waiting for more than a decade for the man responsible to face a courtroom. The FBI is offering up to $250,000 for information leading to his arrest. The man who killed his wife on their wedding day has not been found. Of the 540 people ever placed on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list, only 12 have been women. That number reflects something about how the list is constructed and who tends to commit the kinds of crimes that land a person on it. But it also means that when a woman does appear on that list, the circumstances tend to be extraordinary. Cindy Rodriguez Singh is one of those 12. What she is accused of doing places her case in a category that is difficult to process even by the standards of what this video has already covered. Rodriguez Singh is wanted for the alleged murder of her 6-year-old son. The FBI added her to the 10 most wanted fugitives list as part of its effort to locate and apprehend her after she disappeared following the child's death. The details publicly available through law enforcement describe a case involving a young child who was killed, a mother who fled, a family left without answers. Cases involving the murder of a child by a parent occupy a specific and particularly disturbing place within the broader landscape of violent crime. They represent a fundamental violation of the relationship that is supposed to be the most protective one a child has. The FBI's decision to place Rodriguez Singh on the 10 most wanted list reflects the seriousness with which the agency is treating her disappearance. Being named to that list triggers a level of national publicity and law enforcement coordination that most fugitive cases never receive. Field offices across all 56 regions are made aware. The fugitive's image circulates through federal, state, and local channels simultaneously. Tips come in through multiple portals, and in Rodriguez Singh's case, the nature of the alleged crime means the public response has been significant. People tend to pay attention when a child is involved. She is believed to have fled after the murder, and her current whereabouts are unknown. Law enforcement has not confirmed whether she is believed to be in the United States or abroad, though the FBI has indicated she may have connections that could allow her to move across borders. Fugitives with international ties are consistently harder to apprehend than those who remain within domestic reach. The longer a person remains at large, the more difficult the search becomes. Identities change, appearances change. Networks of people who might once have been willing to turn someone in grow more complicated over time. The rarity of women on the most wanted list does not mean women are rarely involved in violent crime. It reflects, in part, the categories of crime that typically generate federal fugitive status. The majority of cases on both the FBI and Marshals lists involve organized crime, drug trafficking networks, or crimes that cross state and national lines in ways that create federal jurisdiction. Women are represented in those categories at significantly lower rates than men. But when a woman does reach the level of the 10 most wanted, the case that put her there is almost always extreme. Of the 11 women who came before Rodriguez Singh on that list, several were involved in crimes of shocking violence. Her case follows that pattern. The FBI is offering a reward for information leading to Rodriguez Singh's location and arrest. The reward structure for the 10 most wanted list. That now has a minimum floor of $1 million for all fugitives added. Reflects the agency's commitment to using financial incentive to generate public leads. A significant portion of the list's successful captures over the decades have come directly from members of the public who recognized a face, heard a name, or came forward with information they had been sitting on. That dynamic is central to how the search for Rodriguez Singh continues. A 6-year-old child is dead. His mother is believed to have killed him and then disappeared. The FBI has placed her among the most wanted fugitives in the United States. The search for her is active. Cindy Rodriguez Singh is one of them, and she has not been found. U.S. Border Patrol agent Robert Rosas Jr. was murdered in Campo, California, in July 2009. He was 30 years old, a father, and a federal law enforcement officer working one of the most dangerous stretches of the southern border when a group of 5 individuals ambushed and killed him. The man believed to have organized and led that group, Jose Juan Chacon Morales, has never been brought to justice. Campo is a small community in San Diego County, roughly 60 miles east of the city, sitting directly on the border with Mexico. In July 2009, Rosas was working the area when he was attacked and shot. Investigators determined that the killing was not random. A group had moved into the area with weapons, and Rosas encountered them. He was shot and killed during that encounter. The investigation that followed identified 5 individuals believed to be responsible for his death. 4 of them were eventually detained in Mexico, transferred to the United States, and pleaded guilty to charges connected to the murder. Chacon Morales was the alleged boss of the group. He had served as an armed lookout during the killing, and investigators identified him as the one who organized the others. While his 4 co-conspirators faced American courts and entered their pleas, Chacon Morales slipped away. He has not been seen since. The murder of a federal law enforcement officer carries a particular weight within the investigative community. When an agent or officer is killed in the line of duty, the resources committed to finding those responsible expand significantly. The FBI, the Border Patrol, and other federal agencies do not treat those cases the way they might treat a homicide that falls through the cracks of an understaffed local department. Rosas's murder triggered an extensive investigation that identified all 5 suspects. The fact that 4 of them were caught and prosecuted demonstrates that the investigation was thorough. Chacon Morales is the single exception, the one name from that night in Campo who has not answered for what happened. The FBI lists him as armed and extremely dangerous. That designation is not applied uniformly to every fugitive on their most wanted pages. It reflects an assessment that the individual has both the capacity and the willingness to use lethal force. In Chacon Morales's case, that assessment is grounded in the specific facts of the crime he is alleged to have committed. He is accused of organizing a group of armed men who killed a federal agent. The FBI's warning is not theoretical. A reward of up to $100,000 has been offered for information leading to his arrest. That figure is lower than the $1 million threshold now associated with the 10 most wanted list. But it remains a substantial sum and reflects the ongoing federal interest in locating him. Investigators believe he fled into Mexico following the killing. The border region between San Diego County and northern Baja California is an area with extensive criminal networks, and finding a single individual who does not want to be found within that geography is genuinely difficult. 16 years is a long time. The other men involved in the death of Robert Rosas Jr. have been prosecuted, sentenced, and are serving their time. His family has had some measure of legal resolution. The guilty pleas from his co-conspirators. The acknowledgement in court that what happened in Campo in July 2009 was a crime. But the man the FBI identifies as the one who put that group together has spent those 16 years outside the reach of American law. The FBI's San Diego field office continues to list Chacon Morales as an active fugitive. His case is one of several with ties to the San Diego region that federal investigators are still actively pursuing. More than 16 years later, Chacon Morales has never been apprehended, and the FBI says he should still be considered armed and extremely dangerous. Rene Arzate-Garcia, known as La Rana. The Frog is believed to be one of the Sinaloa cartel's most significant regional leaders. His territory is northern Baja California, the stretch of land along the U.S.-Mexico border that serves as one of the most active drug corridors in the world. The FBI considers him armed and dangerous. The charges against him are extensive: narcoterrorism, supporting a foreign terrorist organization, running a continuing criminal enterprise, conspiracy to import and distribute controlled substances, and money laundering. Together, they paint a picture of a man operating at the highest levels of organized crime on the North American continent. The Sinaloa cartel is not a street gang. It is a multinational criminal organization that has moved drugs across international borders for decades, generating billions of dollars in revenue and leaving thousands of people dead in the process. Senior figures within the cartel do not operate in the open. They move carefully, rely on layers of intermediaries, maintain networks of informants on both sides of the border. Some of those informants are civilians. Others are law enforcement officials who have been paid or threatened into cooperation. For someone like Arzate-Garcia, operating within that structure means that law enforcement pressure from either country can be detected, deflected, or simply absorbed before it reaches him. That is what makes cases like his so difficult to prosecute. The charges exist. The federal warrants exist. The FBI has made clear that apprehending Arzate-Garcia is a priority. But priorities and outcomes are two different things when the target has access to the kind of resources the Sinaloa cartel provides: safe houses, vehicles, weapons, communications networks, bribed officials. All of it works in service of keeping senior figures insulated from arrest. The cartel has operated this way for long enough that the infrastructure protecting its leadership is deeply embedded on both sides of the border. The FBI's San Diego field office has been heavily involved in tracking Arzate-Garcia. That reflects the geography of his alleged operations. Northern Baja California sits directly across from San Diego County. The drug trade flowing through that corridor moves into communities throughout California and beyond. What happens on the Mexican side of that border has direct consequences for American cities, American families, and American law enforcement. That proximity makes his continued freedom particularly relevant to the communities most affected by cartel activity. Narco-terrorism charges are not filed lightly. Federal prosecutors use that designation when the evidence supports it. When drug trafficking is carried out with the kind of violence and coercive power that parallels terrorist activity. The addition of that charge to Arzate-Garcia's case reflects how seriously federal law enforcement views his alleged role. He is not accused of being a low-level courier or a mid-level distributor. He is accused of running a criminal enterprise that operates like an armed organization, with the capacity and willingness to use extreme violence to protect its interests. The reward for information leading to his arrest has been set at up to $5 million. That is among the highest reward figures offered by the FBI for any individual fugitive. It reflects both the severity of the alleged crimes and the difficulty of locating him through conventional investigative means. Someone with his alleged resources and his alleged connections is not going to be found through routine police work. He will be found, if at all. This was because someone with direct knowledge of his location decides that the risk of providing that information is worth taking. The FBI is offering up to $5 million for information leading to his arrest. La Rana has not been found. On the same day, Arnoldo Jimenez married Estrella Cabrera in Berwyn, Illinois, in May 2012. She was found dead. Cabrera was 26 years old. Her body was discovered in her apartment just hours after the wedding ceremony. She had been murdered, allegedly, by the man she had just married. Jimenez disappeared before police could arrest him and has not been located since. The case bears a disturbing resemblance to the Bhadreshkumar Patel case covered earlier in this video. Two different men, two different states, 2 different years, both allegedly killing their wives on the day of their wedding. Both fled immediately afterward. Both remain fugitives. The parallel is not a coincidence of circumstance so much as it is a reflection of a pattern that investigators who work domestic violence cases recognize. Intimate partner violence that has been building for some time can reach its most extreme conclusion precisely at moments of perceived permanence or entrapment. A wedding can represent control. It can also represent a last exit. What made the Jimenez case particularly alarming to investigators was the speed with which he vanished. In domestic homicide cases, flight is not unusual, but disappearing so completely and so quickly after the murder suggests some degree of preparation. Whether Jimenez had planned to flee, or whether he acted on impulse and then moved fast, is something investigators have not been able to establish publicly. What is clear is that he has not made the kind of mistake that most fugitives eventually make. He has not surfaced in a way that law enforcement has been able to confirm or act on. The investigation that followed was intensive and remarkably wide-ranging in scope. Federal agencies eventually became involved, given the seriousness of the case and potential for interstate flight. Detectives issued wanted posters and circulated his photograph across law enforcement networks throughout the region and beyond. Despite these substantial and costly investigative efforts, each promising lead that emerged ultimately proved fruitless. Estrella Carrera's family has been left without any resolution. That is the human reality behind fugitive cases like this one. The legal process cannot move forward when the accused is not in custody. There is no trial, no conviction, no sentencing. For the people who knew Cabrera, the absence of any accountability compounds the grief. She was 26 years old on what should have been one of the most significant days of her life, and the person investigators say took that from her has been free for more than 12 years. The Illinois case also highlights how domestic violence often operates behind a surface that appears stable to outsiders. Weddings are public events, there are witnesses, family members, photographs, and yet violence can exist within a relationship that appears, from the outside, to be proceeding normally toward a conventional milestone. Investigators working these cases frequently note that the escalation to lethal violence is rarely sudden in the psychological sense, even when the physical act appears abrupt. Jimenez is considered a fugitive by Illinois authorities, and the case remains open. His whereabouts are unknown. There is no confirmed intelligence placing him in a specific country or region. He may have fled to Mexico or elsewhere in Latin America, as is common in cases involving suspects with ties to those regions, but no public confirmation of his location has been made. The investigation has not been closed. For the Cabrera family, 12 years have passed without answers, without a trial, and without any public accounting for what happened to Estrella on the day she was married. He has been a fugitive ever since. For 76 years, the FBI's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list was the domain of killers, kidnappers, and violent criminals. Men who shot people, men who fled across state lines to escape murder charges, men who escaped from federal prisons and kept committing crimes. The list was built around physical danger, the kind of threat you could see coming toward you. That changed when Anibal Alexander Canelon Aguirre was added as number 540. Aguirre is the first cyber fugitive ever placed on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. He is wanted for allegedly leading a large-scale international ATM jackpotting scheme connected to Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan transnational criminal organization that federal authorities have designated a foreign terrorist organization. The charges against him are not robbery in the traditional sense. No one pointed a gun at a teller. Instead, Aguirre and his alleged associates targeted the machines themselves, using specialized malware and physical hardware modifications to force ATMs to dispense their entire cash reserves on command. That process is what investigators call jackpotting. A compromised ATM can be made to spit out thousands of dollars in minutes. If the operation is coordinated across multiple machines in multiple locations simultaneously, the losses can be staggering. Financial institutions across the country reported being targeted in exactly that fashion. What makes Aguirre's case significant beyond the method is the connection to Tren de Aragua. Federal law enforcement has spent considerable resources documenting how that organization operates, not just through street-level violence, but through sophisticated financial schemes that fund the broader criminal enterprise. Aguirre is accused of sitting at the top of an operation that used cybercrime as a revenue stream for a designated terrorist organization. That framing matters. It means the FBI did not add him to the list simply because he was a clever criminal. They added him because the money he allegedly generated was flowing into an organization that poses a direct threat to public safety across international borders. Tracking someone like Aguirre is fundamentally different from tracking a fugitive who has fled to another country and is hiding in a physical location. Cybercriminals can operate from almost anywhere. They can use encrypted communications, route their activity through multiple jurisdictions, maintain a level of digital anonymity that makes physical surveillance nearly irrelevant. A fugitive hiding in Central America still has to eat, still has to pay rent, still has to interact with someone in the physical world. A cybercriminal running an international fraud operation can, in theory, remain completely invisible while continuing to work. He does not need to surface. He does not need to make the kinds of mistakes that most fugitives eventually make. That is part of what makes Aguirre's addition to the list a meaningful shift. The FBI is signaling that cybercrime carried out at this scale, and with these organizational connections, is not a lesser category of criminality. It is not white-collar fraud to be handled through civil proceedings. It is a top 10 federal priority, the same as murder and kidnapping. For 7.5 decades, the list reflected one understanding of what dangerous meant. Aguirre's inclusion reflects a different one. The reward structure reinforces that. The FBI is offering up to $1 million for information leading to his arrest. The same threshold applied to violent fugitives elsewhere on the list. Whether Aguirre is currently in Venezuela, elsewhere in Latin America, or operating behind layers of digital cover in a location investigators have not been able to identify. The full resources of the Bureau are nominally committed to finding him. Whether those resources are equal to the task of locating someone specifically trained in avoiding digital detection is a question that law enforcement has not yet answered, with Aguirre's addition as number 540. The list entered a new era, and the most dangerous criminals in America now include people who have never fired a gun. The fugitives on the FBI's most wanted list represent law enforcement's highest profile targets, but they are a tiny fraction of the criminals who have committed serious, violent crimes in America and never faced justice. Since 1965, nearly 340,000 cases of homicide and non-negligent manslaughter have gone unsolved in this country. That number comes from the FBI's own uniform crime reporting data, studied by the Murder Accountability Project. It is not a rounding error. It is not a statistical anomaly. It is 340,000 families who called police, waited for answers, and never received them. The murder clearance rate, the percentage of homicides for which law enforcement reports an arrest, has been declining for decades. In the 1960s, police solved somewhere between 60 and 70% of all murders reported to them. By 2024, only 44% of violent crimes reported to law enforcement were resolved at all. For homicide specifically, roughly half of all cases now go unsolved. The direction of that trend has not reversed. Each decade, a smaller percentage of killers face any consequence for what they did. The year 2020 represented a particularly sharp turn. The nationwide homicide rate jumped 30% that year, reaching its highest level since 1995, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Gun murders hit an all-time high. Law enforcement agencies that were already struggling with clearance rates faced a sudden and dramatic increase in caseloads. The result was predictable. More cases, fewer solved. More families in waiting rooms, in victim advocate offices, in the quiet places people go when the police stop calling back. What this means in practice is that thousands of people who have committed murder in the United States are living ordinary lives right now. Some of them have jobs, some have families, some live in the same neighborhoods where their victims' relatives still reside. The most wanted lists, the FBI's 10, the Marshals' 15, the state-level programs maintained across the country, represent law enforcement's best efforts to identify and pursue the most dangerous known fugitives, but they capture something closer to the surface than the full depth of the problem. The 540 people ever placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, 501 of whom were eventually located, are the cases with names, with known suspects, with enough evidence to build a federal profile. The 340,000 unsolved cases are different. Many of them have no suspect at all. The communities hit hardest by this clearance gap are not evenly distributed. Neighborhoods with high rates of violent crime and limited trust in law enforcement are the places where unsolved murders accumulate fastest. When residents don't call police, when witnesses don't come forward, when victims' families believe that reporting a crime will change nothing, the investigation never gets off the ground. The killers in those communities know this. Some of them count on it. The erosion of trust between police and the communities they serve does not only affect public safety in abstract terms. It directly determines whether a murderer is caught or walks free. It is measurable in clearance rates, and the numbers have been moving in the wrong direction for a long time. Against that backdrop, a program with a 93% capture rate sounds extraordinary, and in its own narrow context, it is. When law enforcement has a named suspect, sufficient evidence, and the resources of a national program behind the pursuit, the odds favor capture. But that combination of factors, a known suspect, sufficient evidence, national attention, describes only a small number of the violent crimes committed in America each year. The 10 most wanted list works because it selects for cases where the groundwork has already been done. The 340,000 unsolved homicides represent cases where that groundwork was never completed or never started. The families in those cases did not receive the same attention. They did not see a wanted poster. There was no press conference, no $1 million reward. In many instances, the case file simply sat and then went cold and then stayed cold. Behind each of those numbers is a family that never got an answer, and a killer who has been living free ever since. On March 10, 2026, Samuel Ramirez, Jr. was added to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. He became the 538th person to receive that designation. He was also the shortest tenured member in the program's history. 1 hour and 13 minutes after his name was announced, federal agents apprehended him in Culiacan, Sinaloa, Mexico. The previous record had been held by Billy Austin Bryant, who was arrested 2 hours after being placed on the list in 1969. That record stood for more than 50 years. Ramirez broke it by nearly 47 minutes. What happened in those 73 minutes reflects how fundamentally the mechanics of fugitive capture have changed. In 1969, placing someone on the list meant issuing a press release, distributing physical wanted posters, and hoping that a tip would eventually come in from someone who recognized the name or the face. The process was slow by necessity. Information traveled at the speed of print and telephone calls. In 2026, the announcement of a new addition to the list triggers something closer to an immediate international alert. Law enforcement agencies in cooperating countries receive the information in real time. Intelligence already gathered on a fugitive's likely location gets activated the moment the listing goes public. In Ramirez's case, agents already knew where he was. The announcement itself may have functioned less as a search and more as the final step before an arrest that was already in motion. The contrast with other names on the list is striking. Glenn Stewart Godwin has been a fugitive since 1991. He escaped from Folsom State Prison, made his way to Mexico, allegedly killed a fellow inmate there, escaped again, and has been living somewhere in Central or South America ever since. He has been on the FBI's most wanted list for decades. Trung Duc Lu is believed to be in Vietnam. Jehad Serwan Mostafa has reportedly been operating with al-Shabaab in Somalia since 2006. These are men for whom the list has existed as a formal designation for years, in some cases for most of their adult lives, without producing an arrest. The difference is not always the quality of the law enforcement effort. Ramirez was in Mexico, a country with an established extradition relationship with the United States and active law enforcement coordination channels. The fugitives who remain at large for decades tend to share certain characteristics. They have resources. They have protection networks, whether through family, criminal organizations, or foreign governments with limited interest in cooperation. They operate in regions where American law enforcement has no direct reach, and where local authorities may lack the capacity or the incentive to assist. A fugitive sheltered inside a cartel structure in a region where the cartel effectively controls the local government presents a categorically different challenge than a man hiding in a city where federal agencies already have informants and surveillance in place. Ramirez's 73 minutes on the list will be a footnote in the program's history. It demonstrates what modern law enforcement coordination can accomplish when all the conditions align. But most of the people who make the list do not find themselves in those conditions. It is a reminder that for some fugitives, the list is a death sentence for their freedom, and for others, it has meant almost nothing at all. Not every name on a most wanted list stays there forever. Some of the fugitives covered in this video have been at large for decades, and the realistic prospect of capture grows smaller with every passing year. But occasionally, the hunt ends. Sebastian Enrique Marcet Cabrera is one of those cases. Marcet Cabrera, 34, is a Uruguayan national who spent years at the top of the DEA's priority target list. His organization was not a small operation. Court documents allege that he led a drug trafficking network that moved cocaine in quantities reaching 10 tons at a time, shipping product from South America into Europe through a network of countries that included Bolivia, Paraguay, Uruguay, Brazil, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Portugal. The scale of what he allegedly built required relationships across multiple continents, corrupted officials in multiple jurisdictions, and logistics sophisticated enough to move massive shipments without detection for years. He is also accused of using financial institutions inside the United States to launder millions of dollars in drug proceeds. That particular allegation matters because it ties his operation directly to the American financial system, even though most of his trafficking ran through South America and Europe. Federal prosecutors in Alexandria, Virginia, charged him in connection with a money laundering conspiracy, and in March 2026, Marcet Cabrera made his initial appearance in federal court there. The years of pursuit had ended in a courtroom. What his case illustrates is how large-scale trafficking organizations actually function at the top level. They are not built around a single person. They are built around relationships, supply chains, money movement, and layers of insulation designed to keep leadership far removed from the physical product. A man like Marcet Cabrera was not personally moving cocaine. He was allegedly managing a structure that did. That structure, by its nature, creates vulnerabilities over time. Cooperating witnesses, financial trails, communication intercepts, and the simple attrition of keeping so many moving parts in order across so many countries eventually create openings for investigators. The DEA and international law enforcement partners had been working his case for years before his arrest. International cooperation of that kind is slow, complicated, and often depends on governments with different priorities, different legal systems, and different relationships with the organizations being targeted. It does not happen quickly. The years Marcet Cabrera spent allegedly running his network freely were not years of law enforcement standing still. They were years of building a case complex enough to survive extradition proceedings and federal prosecution. His arrest also reflects the trajectory of international drug enforcement over the past decade. Traffickers at his level rarely get caught at a border with product. They get caught through financial investigations, through informants inside their own organizations, through digital communications, or through the collapse of a protection structure they depended on. Something broke in Marcet Cabrera's network, or his circumstances. By March 2026, he was sitting in a federal courthouse in Virginia. For the other fugitives still at large in this video, his case offers a specific kind of context. The fact that someone can lead a transnational cocaine operation for years, move tens of tons of product, and launder money through American banks, and still eventually face a federal courtroom, matters. The machine did not stop for him. It kept working until it found him. His case is a reminder that the hunt doesn't stop, but it also shows how long that hunt can take, and how much damage a single trafficker can do before the walls finally close in. Most fugitives eventually make a mistake. It might be something as simple as calling a family member on a traceable phone, or returning to a neighborhood they grew up in because they thought enough time had passed. It might be using an old name on a rental application, or trusting someone who later decided the reward money was worth more than their loyalty. These are the moments law enforcement waits for, sometimes for years. The pattern shows up repeatedly in the case histories. A man who stayed invisible for a decade starts relying on the same people, the same routes, the same locations. A fugitive who maintained multiple aliases slips and uses the wrong name in the wrong place. Someone in his protection network gets arrested on an unrelated charge and offers information in exchange for a reduced sentence. The walls close slowly, and then all at once. Modern law enforcement has changed the equation significantly. In 1965, a wanted poster meant a physical piece of paper tacked to a bulletin board in a post office. In 2026, the same image circulates instantly across social media platforms, tip portals, law enforcement databases, and international networks. When Samuel Ramirez Jr. was added to the 10 most wanted list in March of 2026, he was in custody 73 minutes later. The infrastructure behind that speed did not exist 30 years ago. Transnational cooperation has become one of the most powerful tools available. The FBI coordinates with foreign law enforcement agencies in real time, sharing intelligence, financial records, and location data across borders in ways that would have been logistically impossible in earlier decades. Financial tracking has become particularly effective. Fugitives need money to survive, and every transaction leaves a record. Wire transfers, cryptocurrency exchanges, real estate purchases under assumed names. Investigators follow the money because the money almost always moves. Facial recognition technology has added another layer of pressure. A fugitive who walks in front of the wrong camera in the wrong city can trigger an alert without ever knowing it happened. Tip lines now receive submissions from people anywhere in the world, and the reward amounts, a minimum of $1 million for FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives as of 2026, provide serious financial incentive for people who might otherwise stay silent. But not everyone gets caught. The cases that remain open for decades tend to share certain characteristics. The fugitive has left the country and embedded himself in a region where American law enforcement has limited reach. He has resources, cartel protection, criminal organization backing, or enough personal wealth to sustain an alias indefinitely. He has cut ties with everyone who knew him before, and does not contact family or former associates. He has, in practical terms, become a different person in a different place. Glenn Stewart. Godwin has reportedly been somewhere in Central or South America since the early 1990s. Jehad Mostafa operates within a terrorist structure in Somalia, a country where traditional law enforcement access is severely restricted. Trung Duc Lu is believed to be in Vietnam. Each of these men has placed himself in an environment that works against the tools that would otherwise make capture likely. The longer a fugitive remains at large, the harder capture generally becomes. Witnesses age or die. Evidence degrades. Investigative resources shift toward newer cases. The original arresting agency may not even have the same personnel who worked the case. Institutional memory fades in ways that benefit the person who is hiding. What remains consistent is that the ones who get caught are usually the ones who underestimated how persistent law enforcement would be, or overestimated how well they had covered their tracks. The ones who stay free have usually managed both of those things correctly, or had enough external support to compensate when they didn't. For the ones who haven't been caught yet, it usually means they haven't made that mistake, or that when they do, no one is close enough to act on it. Beyond the FBI's list, the U.S. Marshals Service maintains its own most wanted program, and the cases on it are no less disturbing. The Marshals' most wanted fugitives span a wide range of violent crimes, but two cases in particular illustrate how modern criminals operate, and why apprehending them has proven so difficult. One crosses national borders. The other went to extreme lengths to destroy all evidence of what she did. Deshaun Davis is wanted by Miami-Dade County, Florida, for first-degree murder. On top of that charge, authorities in the province of Ontario, Canada, are seeking him for kidnapping. A federal warrant for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution was issued by the United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida. That warrant is significant. It means Davis did not simply flee a city or a state. He crossed an international border, and investigators believe he has continued moving since. Cases like his represent one of the more serious complications in modern fugitive hunting. When a suspect crosses into Canada or Mexico, the jurisdictional machinery becomes more complicated. Different agencies, different legal frameworks, and different extradition processes all have to align or a capture becomes possible. Davis is wanted for murder in one country and kidnapping in another, a combination that suggests someone willing to commit serious violence and then use whatever geographic distance he can put between himself and investigators to stay free. The United States Marshals Service has issued its standard warning on Davis. He should be considered dangerous, and no one should attempt to approach or apprehend him. As of this video, he has not been located. The case of Tamara Williams is different in its details, but equally disturbing in what it reveals about the lengths some people will go to after committing a violent crime. Williams is wanted by the Melvindale, Michigan Police Department on charges that include first-degree murder, dismemberment of a body, tampering with evidence, and felony firearm. The dismemberment charge is what separates this case from a typical homicide investigation. Dismembering a body is not a crime of panic. It requires time, deliberate action, and a willingness to engage in an act that goes far beyond the killing itself. Investigators who encounter dismemberment cases almost always treat that element as evidence of premeditation or, at minimum, calculated efforts to prevent identification of the victim and dester, or physical evidence linking the suspect to the crime. The felony firearm charge suggests a weapon was involved in the original killing. The tampering with evidence charge encompasses the broader effort to eliminate any trace of what occurred. Together, those four charges paint a picture of someone who committed a murder and then systematically worked to make sure it could not be proven. Williams has been sought by the Marshals Service and remains on their most wanted list. No confirmed information about her current location has been made public. What connects both cases is what they reveal about the Marshals program itself. The FBI's 10 Most Wanted list tends to attract the highest profile cases: gang leaders, terrorists, international traffickers. The Marshals list is broader, covering violent fugitives who may not have the same international profile but whose crimes are no less serious. a man wanted for murder in Florida and kidnapping in Canada, a woman wanted for murder and dismemberment in Michigan. These are not abstract threats. They are people who have already demonstrated a capacity for extreme violence and who have remained free long enough to be placed on a national most wanted list. The Marshals Service continues to pursue both. Both remain at large. The romanticized version of life on the run does not match the reality. Movies and television tend to portray fugitives as clever, resourceful people living boldly under assumed names, slipping between countries, always one step ahead. The actual experience, by most accounts from those who have been caught after years as fugitives, is something closer to the opposite. It is years of isolation, distrust, and the constant awareness that a single conversation with the wrong person ends everything. Every new acquaintance is a potential informant. Every routine is a potential pattern that someone could report. Every transaction that leaves a record is a risk. Fugitives who survive for decades tend to survive not because they are brilliant, but because they become almost invisible, cutting contact, avoiding attention, and living in ways that make them nearly impossible to track. Glenn Stewart Godwin has been free since his second escape in 1991. That is more than 30 years of living under aliases, believed to be somewhere in Central or South America, moving when necessary and trusting almost no one. The FBI still lists him. The reward for information about his location is $20,000, a number that has not changed in years and has not been enough to bring him in. Whatever life Godwin has built in those decades, it has been built on a foundation of violence. A murder conviction in California, a second murder in a Mexican prison, 2 successful escapes from 2 different facilities in 2 different countries. He is, by any measure, one of the most dangerous fugitives the FBI has pursued across multiple decades. The Alcatraz escapees, Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin, represent the oldest open question in American fugitive history. They left in June of 1962. If they survived that night in San Francisco Bay, the youngest of them would be in his 90s today. The FBI's working position has long been that they drowned. The Anglin family has maintained for decades that the brothers survived, and they have presented materials they say support that claim. Neither side has been able to prove its case definitively. The file has never been formally closed. What has changed significantly since 1962, and even since 1991, is the infrastructure that pursues fugitives. The FBI's tip portals receive submissions around the clock. Facial recognition tools are now integrated into law enforcement databases in ways that did not exist a generation ago. Financial tracking has become far more sophisticated. The ability to follow money across borders, trace wire transfers, and flag accounts connected to known aliases has made it much harder for a fugitive to operate economically without leaving some kind of trail. The reward minimum for the FBI's 10 Most Wanted was raised to $1 million as of 2026. That is a number that changes the calculation for people who might know something and have been reluctant to come forward. The pace of capture has accelerated. Samuel Ramirez Jr. lasted 73 minutes on the list before international cooperation located him in Mexico. That is an extreme example, but it reflects something real about how quickly information moves now, compared to how it moved in 1969, when Billy Austin Bryant held the previous record with 2 hours. The network that activates when someone is named to the 10 Most Wanted is faster and more globally connected than at any point in the program's history. And yet Trung Duc Lu is believed to be in Vietnam, and he has not been found. Jehad Serwan Mostafa has been operating with Al-Shabaab since 2006. Bhadreshkumar Chetanbhai Patel has been gone since the night of April 12, 2015. Chacon Morales has been at large since July 2009. when Robert Rosas Jr. was shot and killed in Campo, California. The list of people who have outrun the system, at least so far, is not short. Some have international protection. Some have resources. Some have simply been careful enough for long enough that law enforcement has not been able to close the distance. The fugitives in this video represent different crimes, different methods, and different years. What they share is that none of them has faced justice. For the families of the people they killed, they are not ghosts or legends. They are the reason there was never any closure.